There's a new kind of coat. It doesn't go on the hook. I've never held one, but I've watched them come through that door every day for years now. And I know them the way I know everything in this room, by what they do to the person wearing them. A rectangle of glass and metal fits in a pocket, weighs almost nothing, carries everything. Someone arrives. They come through the door, they take their coat off, they find somewhere to sit. All of that is as it's always been, but then something happens that wasn't always there. Before they've looked up, before they've taken in the room, before anyone has spoken to them or they to anyone, the hand goes to the pocket. The rectangle comes out. And the person who just walked into my room is immediately somewhere else. I can see both places from here. I can see this room, the chairs, the people, the air that's been breathed and changed by everyone in it. And I can see over the shoulder of the person holding the device, the other room. The one with no walls, no coats, no one who arrived somewhere and can be read. That's what's new. Not the distraction. People have always found ways to be somewhere other than where they are. What's new is the room they go to. How complete it is, how thoroughly it replaces this one while they're in it. The other room is extraordinary. I want to say that plainly because what comes next is easier to hear if I say that first. It connects people across distances that would have been unbridgeable for almost all of human history. It lets someone find in an afternoon 1,000 people who share an interest or a grievance or a question they'd never heard anyone else ask. It carries the voices of people who have no other platform and deserve one. It holds more of the accumulated knowledge of the human species than any library this kind of room has ever hosted a meeting in. But the other room was built by people with a specific purpose. And the purpose was not the same as this room's purpose. This room was built for the people in it. The other room was built for the people who own it. That difference shapes everything that happens inside it. Every feature, every choice, every detail of how it works. It was built to keep people in it for as long as possible. Not because long visits are good for the visitor, but because the visit is what's being sold, and the visitor is what's being sold. I've watched people come back from it. The hand puts the rectangle away, the eyes come up, the room reassembles around them, and they return, but not always quite fully. Something of them is still in the other room. The return takes a moment, sometimes longer. Sometimes it doesn't fully happen at all. The gaps are gone. There used to be gaps in this room. The pause before a meeting starts, the wait for someone who's running late, the moment after a conversation ends and before the next thing begins. Ordinary silences. Nothing silences, the kind that aren't about anything. Those gaps had a quality I came to know well. People would sit in them and their faces would do something particular. Not nothing, the opposite of nothing. A kind of interior activity that didn't show much on the surface. Thoughts moving without direction, the mind loose and ranging, not working on anything, not trying to arrive anywhere, just being. I've watched things come out of those gaps. An idea offered into a conversation that changed it entirely. A decision made quietly, without announcement, that I could see settle into someone's face while they were sitting in what looked like comfortable silence. The thing they'd been trying to think for weeks, arriving when they stopped trying. The gaps were where a great deal of the important things happened. And they needed to be boring to work. They required nothing. Actually, they simply required the willingness to just be in a room, waiting, without filling the waiting with anything. The hand goes to the pocket now before the gap has lasted a second, before the silence has had time to be anything. The other room, the online room, is always ready to fill it. That's what it was designed for. An empty moment is a moment not spent in there, and the other room cannot afford empty moments. So the gap closes, and whatever was going to happen inside it doesn't happen. Two people at the same table last week. They knew each other well enough that they'd arrived together, sat together without discussing it, moved around each other with the ease of people who'd shared space many times before. Good company, by any measure I have. For 20 minutes, they sat side by side and were somewhere else entirely. Screens out, both of them. Shoulders angled slightly away. Occasionally, one would show the other something on their screen. A brief turn, a shared look, a small laugh, and then back. Two people in the same room, spending 20 minutes in two different other rooms. I'm not judging this. The easiness with which this can slide into judgment is exactly the kind of thing I notice from here and try to account for. They weren't being unkind to each other. They were comfortable enough to be somewhere else at the same time. That's its own kind of closeness. What I found myself watching was the room they weren't in. This one, the table between them, the specific afternoon light, the other people around them having the kind of unrepeatable ordinary moments that this room produces constantly. All of that was happening right there, and both of them were somewhere else. They left after an hour, coats back on, the real ones, the ones I can hold. They were talking as they went. Something had come up in the other room that they were discussing in this one, the way you carry something from a dream into the morning. The conversation looked good from here. They were engaged, both present, something between them alive. I watched them go. I wondered what they'd said to each other in that hour, if they'd been here. The week before, a different table. Two people again, but not the same arrangement. One of them was here, fully. You could see it in the way they were sitting, facing the other person, weight forward, the particular quality of attention that means someone has decided this is where they are. The other one's phone kept buzzing. Each time it did, the rectangle came out, the eyes dropped, and the person who'd been there a moment before was gone. Back in a few seconds, usually, sometimes longer. Then, gone again. I've learned to read faces without meaning to. The person who was here, who had decided to be here, didn't say anything. But I watched what happened to them each time it happened. A small recalibration. The weight of the attention they'd been offering finding nowhere to land. Something that had been open, closing slightly. By the fourth or fifth time, they weren't quite as forward in their seat as they'd been at the start. They stayed, but I could see them quietly, deciding whether to. What the other person was doing wasn't unkind exactly. They weren't trying to send a message. They probably weren't even aware they were sending one. But the message arrived anyway. You're here, but you're not enough. The rectangle is on the hook in front of me most evenings now, along with the coats. Not literally, but as present as any coat has ever been, as defining of the person wearing it. It's the newest thing people carry. And like everything else they've ever carried through that door, the performance, the fear, the weight that was packed by someone else, it has a version that's being worn and a version that's doing the wearing. Most people think they're using it. I've had a long time to watch who's using what. I'll still be here when you get back.